In this lesson, we're going to create the player spawn script. Alright, so in the last lesson we set up the boundaries, which is going to be our dead zone, and then we also set up some checkpoint areas that are based on the track. So you can see on the curves, we have those box colliders still selected there. So now what we want to do is we want to create the script. So let's go to our scripts, right click, create C# script. And let's call this player spawn. And double click on that and bring it up into MonoDevelop. Okay, so let's go ahead and pull all these down here, and let's go ahead and create our first set of variables. So the first thing that I'm going to do is create a public transform, and this is just going to be a position based on a game object that's in our scene, and I'm going to call it player spawn. And then we're going to create another public variable, and it's going to be a vector3. Okay, and this is going to give us a position in space, so we're going to say current track position. And then in here we're going to say public bool. And what we're going to do is whenever we touch dead zone, we're going to activate a respawn timer, so that way whenever we touch it, we can do something like maybe an animation to where the character explodes, or we could have the character flash and then respawn, just so that way it's just not an abrupt flash over into the new current track position. So just a little bit of functionality there. We're not going to flesh this one out completely, but it is there, and you can start to play with that. Okay, so we're going to have a float. We're going to say respawn timer, and let's set this equal to 1.0 f just to start out, and then we'll say public float, and we're going to say reset respawn timer, because whenever we set it off and it times out, we need to reset it after each time. So alright, so at the start, whenever this script is fired off, we want to check to see if the player spawn is null. So if player spawn is not equal to null, so basically we want to check to see if it's there, we will our transform dot position equals player spawn dot position. Okay, and then in our update function, we're just going to go ahead and activate our respawn timer. So if let's say active respawn timer, so if that's true, what do we want it to do? Well, we want it to count down. So we're going to say respawn timer minus equals time dot delta time, and we'll just end that. Okay. Now below this, we're going to say if the respawn timer is less than or equal to 0.0 f, okay, we're going to say to do this. So we'll say transform dot position. So we want it to respawn at the current track position. There we go. And then we're going to say respawn timer equals reset respawn timer. So we're resetting that. And then we're going to go ahead and turn the active timer off. So we're going to set it to false. Alright, great. Now, after this, we need to actually make it work in the first place. So if the player is going to collide with this particular object, we want to get the current track's position. If we collide with a dead zone, we want to activate the respawn timer. Okay, so first and foremost, let's create a new function, and this is going to be void on trigger enter. So this is a Unity function that we're using here, and we want to pass in what collider we want to collide with. So we're going to say collider, and we're going to give it just a generic name. So usually it's other. And then we're going to identify what the other collider is. And if it collides with that collider, it's going to do this bit of code. So if other, which is the collider, tag is equal to, and then we give it a name. So in our case, we had checkpoint, and you have to make sure that you spell it exactly the same. Make sure that everything is capitalized exactly the same as you set it in your tag. So checkpoint, and then what is it supposed to do if we've collided with that checkpoint? We're going to say current track position equals transform dot position. Okay. So it's basically going to store its position, okay, the current track points or checkpoint's position at current track position. So we'll be able to see that variable. Now if other.tag is equal to dead zone, and again make sure that's spelled exactly the same, we want it to do this. We're going to say activate respawn timer, and we're going to set that to true. And there we go. So once that active respawn timer is set to true, it's going to come up here and say, all right, we're true, so we're going to start counting down. And then once that countdown reaches 0, then we're going to take the transform position of our player and we're going to set it to the current track position, which is going to be found down here. All right, so let's go ahead and save this and let's apply that to our player. So inside of Unity, we'll go to our player prefab up here, and we're just going to add component. I'm going to go ahead and minimize some of this. I don't need the rigid bodies right now and the collider. Let's go ahead and add component script and then player spawn. And here you'll see all of that is ready to go. Looking good. And now you'll see that we have a player spawn, but right now it's null. So what we want to do is we want to create an empty game object to be our player spawn. And so to do this, let's go ahead and select our prefab player car, and I'm going to go to game object, create empty, and I'm going to call this player spawn. And then I'm just going to position that somewhere in the scene here. So it's going to be set at 0.5 on the Y, and let's do something like 10. Okay, and we'll do 4.5 to the right, just to see that this is working. So that is set, and we are now ready to go. Let's go ahead and go to our player car, and we need to make sure that we assign this value. So assign that to the player spawn. So we need to find the object. It's in the scene. So there's player mesh, player spawn is what we want. So that's been set. Let's go ahead and expand our current track position. This is that vector 3 that we'll have. And I'm going to go ahead and apply this to the prefab so that way everything is set. All right. Let's go ahead and hit play. And when we come in here and we collide with one of those corners, notice that the track position updates. And then we come up and we collide with another one. It updates again. And we're driving along and all of our track points are working as they should, but let's say that we overshoot this one a little bit too far and then we touch the dead zone. Notice that it respawns us back at our current position. Now there's a little bit of an issue with that. It does respawn us, but it continues to drive the rigid body. And so what we want to do is we want to basically halt that and then also remove any controls from the player for just a little bit. So just some minor things, not anything that's going to break our game right now. So and again, notice the current track position is working perfectly. So now that we have this set, we've got our player spawn. And actually, did we spawn in the correct place? To make sure. Yep. Okay, here we go. Good. All right, so now we have our current track's position. We've got that dead zone working. Now we have a little bit of functionality to where if the player were to take damage from another player or something like that, we have the ability to respawn at the last checkpoint available. So now that we have that ready to go, we're going to start working on our power-up functionality next.